In a world of increasing global uncertainty, what is the next big thing? Is it going to be the decade of AI? Is that a story that is being overbought right now? And what will we see in terms of India emerging as one of the largest players on the world stage? Now, rather than me speculate about all of these things, I think the best person to speak to about this is John Chambers. He's with us right now in this exclusive interview, speaking only to the NDTV network. And remember, John Chambers' 2024 outlook is something that is very well followed, very well seen by everyone, and he gets most of his predictions right. So
I try hard. I've seen every movie, Tammanna, and I've made every mistake there is to make, but I'm pretty good at pattern recognition.
Yeah. So having said that, your predictions on inflation being a big pain post the pandemic, on the impact of COVID, on a whole host of things, has really ticked all the boxes. So that's a great spot to start with.
Yes.
And let's begin with that. So the biggest or the number one on your list for predictions for 2024 is AI. Something which half the world is scared of and the other half is excited about. Where do you stand?
Well, I'm the half that is realistic on the opportunity it will bring. It will help us cure cancer. It will make us more healthy over time. It has the benefit to benefit every citizen in the world, and to have economic strengths as well as huge productivity strengths. It's going to move very fast, though, so I worry about job creation keeping up with the jobs that it will displace. I worry about misuse of spatial and cybersecurity on it. But where you're leading me, I agree with, because when you talk to a person about their views for the future, your audience is going to say, well, I've heard about John, but I don't know him that well. You were kind in the introduction. In January of 2020, we said there's some illness coming out of China that is slowing business in Southeast Asia. And I said, this is going to have a major economic impact.
Yeah.
And then by 2022, at the time, everybody thought COVID, and it was a terrible thing that happened to all of us, but thought that would be the dominant force in 2022 and 23. I said, no, it will be inflation, which unfortunately turned out to be very accurate. That was when I made the big bets on AI, saying it would become mainstream in early 22, and it did toward the end of that year, as you know. I've been betting on AI companies, including several major Indian startups, for 7 years now. And I think it will not only be as big as the internet or the cloud, it'll be 3 to 5 times its size. I think its impact on society will be largely positive, but we've got to have some guide rails in place. Do I think India has a chance to lead in AI in a way it's never led in technology before? I really do.
Yeah. So right now, the biggest AI story from the market's perspective, I suppose, is NVIDIA.
Yes, it is.
Everyone's wondering what's happening there. And when you say that India is well positioned to lead in AI, why so? Because the question also emerges whether some of our largest tech companies have done enough, or are they going to be playing catch up?
3 or 4 questions. Let me take them in the sequence that you raised them. For your audience, when you really want to keep your fingers on the pulse of AI, you want to look at the infrastructure players for AI. So to draw the parallel, if you wanted to keep your pulse on what was occurring in the internet in the 1990s, you just watch Cisco and our earnings, where we grew an average of 65% a year for 10 years, never missed a quarter, created 10,000 millionaires among our employees, and won every corporate social responsibility award there was to win. And that's also when I bet on India in a big way. But we were the infrastructure player for everything the internet represented. The infrastructure players for AI are NVIDIA and starting to be a new challenger, AMD. So if you look at the NASDAQ over the last 12 months, it's up 39%. If you look at the Dow, it's up 19%. NVIDIA is up 225%, and AMD is up 125%. So you follow the infrastructure players. When they are going full bore, it means all the related areas that use that infrastructure are also going very aggressively. I have 20 startups, 9 unicorns, which is pretty good for a small company on it. And it used to be 5 of them were AI companies. I then strongly encouraged and then pushed really hard for every one of my startups to become an AI company first. who measures in supply chain or cybersecurity or the capabilities to really provide call centers with AI capabilities. So I think it will go across all industries. Now back to the question, what India's advantages are. India, going back to just 7 or 8 years ago, it was a wonderful country. I love the people here. I put my second world headquarters here 20 years ago. Always believed in its future, but we were always a slow follower. We were not risk takers. We did not really have a good startup community, and the established companies were very comfortable just continuing to do what they did very well in the industry. Fast forward to today, and I think Prime Minister Modi has had a huge amount to do with this, a vision that inspired dreaming what India could be and inspired hope, and then began to show the outcomes toward that and get the results. The results have been dramatic. India has moved to the fastest growing unicorn generator in the world. And even though many of the unicorns may fall from grace over time, the ones who grow will be the next major players in high tech. And the fastest growth for 2 years in a row has occurred out of India. And it's challenging the rest of the world. Within that also, India has partnered very closely with the US for the most strategic partnership between any two countries in history. And so we watched Prime Minister Modi and President Biden say that last summer. It was near and dear to my heart because that was our dream 7 years ago. Back to the Indian tech companies. Large companies in technology traditionally do not make the next generation of leadership. So there was the IBM in mainframes, the DEC, Wang, Data General, and mini computers. I was at Wang also. Then there were the servers like Compaq and HPE, et cetera, and Dell. And then there was the internet players, then the cloud players, and now AI. Where I'm leading your audience is never before has the leader in one category had the courage to reinvent themselves for another.
Right.
This time might be the exception. And you see the large players, the Microsoft racing to that direction. You see the Googles, the Meta, the Apples going toward it. However, normally speed favors the small player.
So where's our OpenAI?
Well, OpenAI isn't going to be the one that necessarily makes money here. It's who builds on top of that infrastructure capability. The large language model, large language capabilities, modules are going to be players, but the real players are going to be those that say, how do you turn this into business results? So I would look at who is your players business to business, who is your players business to consumer, who are your players in supply chain, who are your players in cybersecurity. That's where you get the tremendous leverage, and that's where the growth happens. Different than just a decade ago, you've got an amazingly vibrant startup community, largely around your IITs, but you have a capability to bring that across all 29 states. You have an ability to dream. You create 1 million engineers a year. The US only creates 60,000. And so you have a youngest population in the world, one that is, in my opinion, destined to have the fastest growth in standard of living in the world and become the #1 economy, as I said last summer in front of Prime Minister Modi at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. when I introduced him. You will be the largest economy. The only question is, does that happen in 35 years or in 60 years? And we'll see which one it is based upon your growth. So there's a window here. But the companies have to have the courage to move. Government has to create the right advantages and opportunities for the companies to move. Are you positioned uniquely to lead in areas of manufacturing versus China? Absolutely. Absolutely, in a big way. But you're positioned to do that in almost all industries, from agriculture to defense to high tech, et cetera. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'll come back to the AI bit, and we'll talk about the India piece in more details, because so John Chambers wears many hats, and we're trying to get him on all of it. This part of the interview is about US Chairman Emeritus Cisco, as someone who's led and made sure Cisco survived a huge amount of change very successfully for 20 years. So my question to you is...
You're going to ask a tough one, because when you say that many words, nice words in the introduction, I'm ready. I got my seatbelt fastened.
It's not a tough one. It's an easy one. Today, if you ran a large IT company or an internet company, and you're wondering, what do I do with AI, where I make money off it, I make sure it's safe, it doesn't destroy the world, as a lot of people are thinking about it, regulations are on the horizon. What do you do right now if you led, as of today, of course, you lead very successful startup venture, and we'll come to that. But today, in that position, what would you do?
Well, when I left Cisco, I made my personal commitment. I would support them, but it was their company to run. And I wouldn't want the ex-CEO saying, here's what I think of that company's future, et cetera. So I did that very smoothly, and Cisco's a great company. It's my child on it. Now, back to your bigger question, however, a large high-tech company, or a large bank, or a large insurance company, or a large retail company, or a large oil company, you've got to have the courage to reinvent yourself. You've got to have the courage to disrupt. You've got to have the courage to destroy your business models before somebody else destroys them. You've got to have the courage to get out of your comfort zone, where you don't view AI as fear. You say it has tremendous power. I've got to understand its strengths, and I've got to understand how I'm going to use it uniquely.
Okay, so you were chairman of the United States-India Strategic Partnership Forum.
Yes.
And that is an exciting place to be right now, because you have the vantage point of seeing what's working in this partnership. A lot obviously is.
Yes.
And where the challenges also lie, where sometimes it depends on who's in the White House. It sometimes depends on, what the point of view is in terms of America first, India first, but you want to have a market that works for both sides.
Yes.
So you've talked about everything that works in the partnership, and we'll come to more on that.
Okay.
But where do you see the challenges?
Okay, and you know me well enough by now, for your audience, when you ask me a tough question, I'm going to answer it only partially, hit the positives first, then I'll hit the direct question, if that's all right. So just so your audience knows just what I just did. I always start with what is working. India and the US are joined at the hip, and I don't see that ever coming apart. If so, both sides will not benefit. The relationships are no longer about one leader to another leader. It's deeply embedded into the country's fabric on both sides. We see all of your government leaders of all your parties come into the US, and we get to know each other. Same thing is true in reverse. And it's not just at the national level. Even my home state of West Virginia, a very small state, only 2 million people. They're spending the delegation over from their universities, from their Senate, from their House, the governor, to talk about what we could do together with India. So I think that confidence is now deeply inbred into the fabric. So 5 years ago, if there was a break between our two leaders, regardless of who they were, it had been hard to hold it back. Now we are so intertwined. Now, what could cause it to come apart is people need to always think in a partnership. How does your partner win? So if we become selfish and look internally, that'll be a problem. What is China's biggest mistake over the last decade? They looked internally. And remember, I bet on China in 1995 when almost no other high-tech company did, and I benefited hugely from that at Cisco, and it's been very good. But as you know, you've done your homework remarkably well, I pulled away from China in 2017. And I encouraged all my startups not even to do business in China, because it was win-lose. So I think both sides have to think about, how do you win? We did that in COVID. We do it in defense. Are we going to have differences along the way? Of course. But you've got to have the ability to have that give and take in terms of how you manage to it. And you've got to build relationships at all levels of government, business, and startups. One thing about your prime minister, and obviously I'm a huge fan, I think he's the best leader in the world today, and I wish we had somebody like that in the US. We haven't got a political leader who has over a 50% approval rating, and Prime Minister Modi has 76%. But he has the ability to build trust. If you think about a leader, it's about their track record, it's about their relationships and trust. He's formed a relationship with every political leader we've had in the US. People trust him. So I think India and the US will be fine regardless of which way our election goes in terms of the direction. Now, what do we need to do better? I think we've got to make sure this is inclusive for all our citizens. We need to think, how do we take advantage of the opportunity? Use supply chain, working together. US needs a very secure supply chain from a democracy we trust. That is China's Achilles heel, if you will. And there's an opportunity for China and the US to get even closer together. And when I said that India would come on the global scene 6-7 years ago, people said, no, you watch now, India is front and center on the global hierarchy in terms of what can be done. So I think working through the challenges, how do we make sure this is inclusive? How do we do the job creation, not just economic growth, but job creation? How do we make sure that the citizens benefit from this across all the states in the US and across all the states here in India? Those are the challenges. And the other thing that will surprise you, we got to move a lot faster. Everybody's saying we're running 100 miles an hour and they get all excited. No, we're not. We have to move even faster. AI operates at 3 times the speed of the internet. Internet operated at 3 times the speed of the traditional market. That's a factor of 9. That is really fast movement.
Okay, so
Did I answer your question? Okay.
In part.
Okay.
I'll come to more. The reason I asked the question also is we have an election this year, a big one in India and the US.
Yes.
I may go as far as to say maybe the one in the US will be more of a suspense and exciting than in India. The markets, etc., have factored in policy continuity here at least. Does it make a difference to the partnership whether Trump is in the White House possibly, or a Biden continuation, or someone else? As a business leader, how big a factor is it about what happens in the United States in terms of elections later this year?
Well, one of the first things that I did when I was fortunate enough to have the leadership at Cisco in the very early 90s is I formed, along with one of the top venture capitalists, John Doerr, TechNet. And that was to have influence in Washington and around the world on technology, which we never did before. And we always did it as individual companies. And we built it with the premise that we cannot be tied to one political party or another. We have to represent all of America because there's going to be lots of challenges that go with it. So I think business leaders who make the mistake of tying themselves completely to one party or another make a mistake on that. I think the business leaders can say what their opinions are and what they view in terms of economic growth and creation and predictability. And then you can say your views in terms of the importance that India and the US play very strongly, which I have no problem doing with whichever leader the US picks. I wish we had stronger leaders in the cycle, to be very candid. As you know, the majority of Americans would like to see somebody other than the 2 most likely candidates. First time in my lifetime that's occurred. But my parents are both doctors. You deal with the world the way it is. And so whichever one wins, I will absolutely support. And whichever one wins, I guarantee you Prime Minister Modi will find a way to build that trust and the candid relationship. But the teams now trust each other. The American Indian diaspora is amazingly powerful. Half of our large technology companies are led by ex-Indians.
Why do you think so? I mean, that's a matter of fascination back home as well. And, Indians here like to sort of think that, oh, they're our own. Of course, a lot of them have studied.
They are your own.
I mean, they've got those opportunities. In America, they're American citizens, but, we like to appropriate all your brown CEOs. But why do you think that happens?
Well,
why do you think that
you're going to have
works?
to accept me as an Indian, too, because I love this country. But why it happened is very simple. Your IITs and your education system generated 3 decades of top engineers. And the majority of successful companies, whether it's Lisa Su at AMD, or where you're going with Microsoft with Satya, Adobe with Shantanu, IBM with Arvind, etc., half of those leaders are Indian engineers. I'm the exception. I'm a business leader in a technology-driven environment. And so the reason is very simple. An education system that teaches about technology and how to build great companies is just getting stronger, but also one that learns how to partner together. So if you talk to any of the leaders I've just met, all of them believe hugely in the Indian-US relationship. All of them believe in how do we benefit the citizens in America and the citizens in India, inclusive, and regardless of age, geographic location, religion, et cetera, on it. So it's a simple answer. People try to make it too complex. When I said India will become the largest economy in the world, first leader, I think, to really say that very aggressive on a national stage in front of your prime minister and in front of Secretary of State Blinken, that was, in hindsight, a little bit scary, and it was.
I want to ask you why you made that bet, and you've spoken about Prime Minister Modi, through this interview. You've even said that I wish we had a leader like him in the US. I want to understand why. I want to understand why, and why you are saying that India will be the largest economy in the world. It's a matter of when, not if.
Yes. So you really hit at the heart of the issue, and you got there very quickly. The reason I'm very good at pattern recognition, I'm dyslexic. which means I have to go A, B, Z. I can't go A, B, C, D, E, F. I get lost in it. And for any of your audience who's dyslexic, and it's something that is a weakness on one hand, but you have to learn to balance. It's a nice way of saying, once I see pattern recognition, I look, how does that play out? And that's why people say I'm able to see around the corners. I'm able to understand the internet, the cloud, cybersecurity, voice being free. Every country becomes digital. Now every country becomes an AI company. If you look at the mathematics, India's population is going to have the fastest economic growth, not just for the next 5 years, but with the plans and programs your Prime Minister is putting in place now for the next 20 to 30 years, assuming that you have the courage to continue to take risks and be critical of yourself on it. You look at the population growth, average age 26 or younger, average age in China aging rapidly in terms of the direction. China's population going from about 1.4 billion to 800 million with a much older population. India's going from 1.4 billion to 2 billion. The ability to do the education with the speed, the optimism, the entrepreneurship. China's issues are how self-inflicted. They got away from reasonably free enterprise. They got away from startups. The government started to get involved in almost everything, put regulations in place, put a win-lose mentality versus the US and much of the rest of the world. Doesn't surprise me, they've slowed down.
Do you think they can recover?
No.
No?
I think the mistakes have been too dramatic. Now they've got demographics going against them on population from 1.4 to 800 million. Could they? Yes, but do I think they will? No, because it requires tremendous courage. And you've got to say, what was it that got us on top and miss? Now, remember, 3 years ago, if I had said that, everybody would look at me like, John, what are you thinking? But I said it 3 and 5 years ago. And it's hard once you lose that entrepreneurial spirit. It's hard once you use the foreign direct investment into a country to get it going again. Trust. Do you have the track record? Do you have the relationships and trust? And China lost most of those. Now, do I think it's in India's and the US best interest in China to recover and get stronger? Absolutely. Because this is one the whole world can benefit from. And do I think over time the US and China will do dramatically better than we are doing today? Yes. But China came with a win-lose attitude. And so I think in that, people forgot about entrepreneurship and the empowerment. And if a government, regardless of its form of government, over-regulates, over-controls innovation, you don't move with the speed of innovation. Could they recover? Possibly, but I think if you look at the math, it's very hard. So how did I see it? Purely math. It was easy to do the math out, the education, the democracies working together, et cetera. Now, if India misexecutes or the US misexecutes, could China be there? Yes. Fast forward from 3 years ago, everybody said China would be number one. People said US would be number two, India number three. I actually think it's going to be India, US, and China. If I were forecasting out half century, I'd say the US will be probably 30% bigger than China. India will be maybe 90% bigger than China.
Whoa.
So we'll see if that plays out.
Yeah, that's a big
one.
Am
I an optimist? Oh yeah. But I believe in your country. I believe in your citizens. I believe in the relationship with the US. You are a country of dreamers, but you have the ability now, because you've seen it work, to take dreams, inspire hope, make a difference, and drive it through.
All right, so let's get a couple of questions from you on the startup side of it. And like you said, 9 unicorns, you know how to spot the winners.
Yes.
What is the best and worst startup pitch you have heard recently? And if it's to do with AI, that's fine, but otherwise also.
Okay, so this time I'm going to reverse. I usually like to lead with the best first and the area to improve on second on it. The thing that is frustrating to me as a VC, but also I sponsor these young companies. The young CEOs, I almost make them part of my extended family. When they get bought, and several of my companies will get bought this year, and several will probably go public, I'm there like a proud father, saying, how do you go forward? What a number of them make the mistake on is they come in, they pitch you on their company, and after 20 minutes, I still don't know what they do. I don't understand what the differentiation is. Everybody's going to use the word, say I'm in an AI now, but I don't care. You better be an AI now. I want to know how you're going to use it differently, et cetera. They don't connect with their person they're pitching to. So those are the classic mistakes, and those are the things I like to coach with young people on, and I often in my podcasts get leaders on to talk about how do you present properly, how do you drive it. The best ones have moved from getting all excited about technology and talking about it vertically to talking about the outcomes you can get and how do you build platforms that have architectures which allow your customers to achieve those goals. And they approach it from a customer perspective. One of the toughest pitches I ever saw was a person presented to me to bet on crickets 8 years ago. Crickets is the next form of protein. And
crickets as in the insect?
The insect, yes.
Okay.
Growing billions of crickets in factories. And when I heard this, I went, I don't think so. And then I watched him win the Clinton Global Initiative, top startup of the year with 25,000 companies applying to it, to an independent third party. And I said, Mohammed, tell me again what you do. And he said, crickets. And he explained to me how he was doing this and how he's using big data to go after it. And he said, will you invest? I said, no. And he came back again, and I invested with him. And today, he's the #1 player in this industry. Crickets have the capability to produce the majority of protein that much of this world needs. Majority of our protein for animals will be from crickets on it. They build $25 million plants where you harvest the crickets, you put them in a container, billions of crickets per month. You bring it all the way through, no human introduction. And instead of doing tremendous damage to the environment, you produce protein both for our pets and for people that can't be done another way. So the worst one was me not being comfortable getting outside my comfort zone.
So maybe
this is what your listeners have to do.
The strangest idea, perhaps. I'm still wrapping my head around.
Oh yeah, it's one that you have to listen to.
The cricket protein take, but this has been fantastic. Thank you so much, John.
It was an honor. Thank you as always.
Thank you.